Oi, lads. Alright, blue. Blue cards from Phyrexia will be one. Ickermoon Gauntlet. 3-mana artifact, Planeswalker pile card. 0, proliferate, -12, take an extra turn. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, choose a counter and target permanent, put an additional counter on that kind of permanent. I'm very suspicious of this card because this second paragraph is really weird. It feels like when they were designing the set, they started with this just proliferates your whole board, but then they thought that that was too strong for some reason, and they've changed it just to proliferate one thing. So that scares me. That makes me think that maybe it's actually OP, but I doubt it. I mean, -12, take an extra turn after this one, that's absolutely irrelevant. That'll never happen. 0 proliferate. I mean, is your Planeswalker activation be proliferate even actually good in any way? Who cares? It's pretty cool to add another charge to your Bankbuster, yeah, but I mean, to be honest, a lot of the power from Bankbuster comes from the fact that you do run out of charges eventually, and then you can start attacking for 4 as well. I don't know. I mean, my initial impression of this card is that it's absolutely terrible, but I'm extremely suspicious about this second paragraph and why they've clearly changed it from just proliferate to only hit one thing. Maybe there is a way to use it. Jace the Perfected Mind. 3 or 4 mana for 3 loyalty or 5 mana. Or 5 loyalty, sorry. +1, one target creature gets -3, so -2, target player mills 3 cards. Then if a graveyard has 20 or more cards in it, we stop reading and we move on to the next card. Impossible to achieve. Tekathul Inquiry Dominus. 4 mana flyer if you proliferate twice instead. 1, 2, or 3, remove 3 counters from other artifacts, creatures, and planeswalkers. Put an indestructible counter. So they really want you to play a lot of planeswalkers, huh? And proliferate their asses. This is just so bad, man. Blade of Shared Souls. You get a 2/2, and when it becomes attached, you can copy a creature you control. Equip 2. This seems pretty bad to me too. I mean, what are you copying? You need some 2-mana creatures in your deck that are worth copying on turn 3, which I can't think of any that even exist. Blue Sun's Twilight. Now this is a very interesting card. In my opinion, one of the best blue cards in the set, I think. Gain control of target creature with mana value X or less. If X is 5 or more, create a token that's a copy of that creature. So for X equals 0, therefore just only 2 blue, you can steal a Fable of the Mirrorbreaker Goblin token, which is absolutely insane. If you get 1 attack off with that Goblin, essentially your Twilight cost 1 mana. And the way to think about yoink spells is to think about, like, basically you've killed their creature and you've played your own one, right? So you've done 2 cards worth of stuff. So it is a 2-for-1 straight up, no matter what you target. Normally that's balanced by making it expensive to cast, and this is kind of expensive to cast, but it's not expensive to cast when there's highly valuable tokens in the format, which obviously there is in Standard with Fable. Even if you go all the way up to stealing a Shelly, it's still pretty good. But that's getting to ridiculous territory. The question is there anything other than Fable to steal early on in the game? Or Fable token, sorry. Which, I mean, I think there is. Even if you're playing against an aggro deck and you steal their 1-drop, it's still 3 mana to kill their 1-drop and play your own creature. That's really good. But stealing their Fable Goblin Shaman will be the best use of this card. Fable is the best card in Standard, and this card is good against Fable. Therefore, this card is not only playable in Standard, but it will be incredibly strong and it will be seen a lot. If a card is good against Fable, it doesn't matter what else it does, it's playable in Standard. Encroaching Microsynth. Non-land permanents or artifacts, blah blah blah. Okay, Spell Dancer. This one seems kind of interesting too to me. Can't be blocked. That's obviously good. When you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on the Spell Dancer. When it deals combat damage to a player, you can remove 2 oil counters. If you do, your next instant or sorcery gets copied, and there's no cap on the mana cost. So this seems great in a deck with, 4 considers in it, for example. That type of, man, stupid is it deck with lots of cheap cards in it. This it has to be good. It's a 2-mana 2/1, can't be blocked, and after you cast 2 spells, you get to copy your 3rd one. What's not to like? And these type of decks, these type of like spell decks always have great creatures in them, so it's not like your opponent can just hold all the removal until you play your Spell Dancer. Like, they're gonna have to remove your Swift Spear, they're gonna have to remove your Shredder, they're gonna have to remove your Balmor, or whatever else you end up playing. So yes, I mean, your Spell Dancer is gonna die sometimes before you get to copy a spell, obviously, but you know, I mean, if your Spell Dancer dies, then maybe your Swift Spear gets to live. If your Spell Dancer dies, maybe your Shredder gets to live. If your Shredder dies, maybe your Spell Dancer gets to live. That's the power of these decks, right? They don't play a ton of creatures, but every single one of them has to be killed. And sometimes your opponent can't kill every single one of them. Mind Splice Apparatus. 4 mana flash artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, put an oil counter. Instants and sorceries cost 1 less for each oil counter. Seems horrible. People main deck like 4 Abrades already. They main deck 4 Terra Sunders already. It's just not good. Serum Sovereign. 5 mana 4/4. When you cast a non-creature spell, add an oil counter, remove an oil counter, draw a card. No thanks. Unctus Grand Metatect. What a name. Other blue creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes tapped, draw a card, then discard a card. Other artifact creatures get +1/+1. Until end of turn, target creature you control becomes a blue artifact in addition to its other colours and types. This seems kind of horrible. It's other blue creatures, so you don't get to even loot off of itself. You have to play mono blue essentially. You have to play mono blue with lots of creatures. That is a deck that never has and never will exist. Atmosphere Surgeon. Wait, that's all the rares already? Okay. I mean, to be fair, blue rares and mythics are normally worthless anyway. Blue exists for its counter spells and card draw, which are basically never rare anyway. So it doesn't really matter. Like, when was the last time anyone cast a blue mythic spell? People cast Make Disappear, because that's good. But blue mythics are always just so terrible. But if you were going to pay attention to any colours, uncommons and commons, it should be blue. So let's be careful we don't miss anything here. Atmosphere Surgeon. 2 mana 2/1, cast a non-creature spell, get an oil counter, remove an oil counter, fly in a sleep. Curiosity. 3 mana draw 2, 1 mana draw 2 if they've got 3 poison counters. Seems fine if you're playing a poison deck, but why would you be unless you're a role player? Font of Progress. Enters the battlefield with 2 oil counters. Mill. Sleep. Counter target spell with mana value 1 or less. The card's broken as hell, but not in standard. Reject Imperfection. Counter target spell if it was 3 or less. Proliferate. I think it's just worse than the Urza one that we have already, that can tap 2 creatures. It's only really better than Urza if you're already ahead with something in play that you want to proliferate, but even if that's the case, then, you know, you've resolved a permanent, you've kept it in play, and you've countered their threatening thing that's threatening to remove that permanent. Well, you'd already won the game before you even cast this anyway, so there's no reason to even play it. Serum Snare. Return a non-land permanent to its owner's hand if that permanent had mana value of 3 or less. Proliferate. Brazen Borderer without the Brazen Borderer. Never been interested, never will be. Tameo's Immobilizer. Enters the battlefield with 4 oil counters on it. Remove an oil counter from tap creature. 4 mana, tap 4 creatures over 4 turns. No thanks. Tameo's Logbook. 3 mana, 6 and a tap, draw a card, 1 less for each other artifact you control. The card's pretty good, but again, not in standard. Thummingbird. Deals combat damage to a player. Proliferate. Bad. 4 mana 2/4. When an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. Bad. Trawler Drake. 3 mana flyer. 2 counters. +1/+1 for each oil counter. When you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter. What? Oh wait, this is a sprite dragon without haste, and it costs 3. Okay, no. Terrible. But Toxic 1. When it enters the battlefield, up to 1 target artifact you control becomes... I needed a second for that one, sorry. Retrofitter. Up to 1 target artifact you control becomes an artifact creature with base power 4/4 for as long as it remains on the battlefield. 3 mana 2/3 Toxic 1. Make one of your stupid artifacts be a 4/4. I don't know, man. I don't think so. Blister Zoa. Oil counter when it dies, draw cards. 6 mana though. +1/+3 flying and toxic 1. Seems bad. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 2. Counter it completely if they have 3 or more poison counters. I mean, obviously that's very good if they have 3 or more poison counters, but I'm very concerned that I've already lost the game once my opponent gets the 3rd poison counter on it. I don't see the poison thing, but of all the corrupted payoffs so far that we've seen, this is probably the best one. It just seems so hard to get 3 poison counters on your opponent, man. Like, in a reasonable way. Chrome Prowler. When it enters the battlefield, tap target creature an opponent controls. When it attacks, opponent creature gets -X/-0, where X is the number of artifacts you control. Experimental Augury, top 3 cards, 1 into your hand, the rest in the bottom, proliferate. Eye of Malcator, 3 mana, ETB Scry 2. When an artifact enters the battlefield, this becomes a 4/4 until end of turn. It's pretty weird. Gitaxian Animist. Yeah, there doesn't actually seem... there's not as many nice blue commons than I thought, man. There seems to be way more, like, just dumpster blue creatures than there normally is. Like, where are all the instants and sorceries, man? It's all just bad creatures. Flying Vigilance, when it dies, draw a card. Okay, that's a nice one. Artifact creature as well. That is a good one. Enters the battlefield, put up to 1 target instant or sorcery from your graveyard on top of your deck. Prologue to Phyrexia. Opponent gets a poison counter, draw a card. It's 2 mana, man. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card and discard a card. Draw 3 cards, proliferate. Okay, blue chat. Blue, 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 blue. This seems insanely good, Blue Sun's Twilight. I do like the Spell Dancer, but the thing about is it spell decks, at least in Standard, in older formats than Standard, they're just good everywhere 100% of the time in all formats. But in Standard, they're actually rarely good. And the problem is not the creatures, the problem is the spells. The creatures are always good enough. So this is a great card. We'll see if Izzet is actually a deck, though. I will definitely be trying it. Let me say that. There's a few decent corrupted cards if corrupted is actually good, which I don't believe yet, but we'll see. The draw 2 is good. The counter spell. This creature I think can be decent. We'll see though. Yeah, I mean so far I'm not really impressed with white or blue. I think that the Twilight is a certainty to be played. Spell Dancer maybe, and then the corrupted cards maybe. The counter spell and the draw 2. Everything else is bad, I think, which is a little crazy.
Ecuador. Ecuador.